How to live longer, protecting yourself from chronic diseases, how to increase your lifespan and health span. It's not just about living longer, but actually living better into your older age. So it is actually a big pleasure to interview Dr. Fontana. I will let you introduce yourself because the curriculum is quite large, but I will also talk a little bit afterwards from the info you also sent me. I have said this before, but I admire your work a lot. I think you, Longo, Sinclair, and others longevity sciences gerontologists are actually visionaries. They are really ahead of their times with the knowledge that is being produced about longevity. But most of the medical world, the nutrition world, doesn't pay enough attention to the science and to the visionary work you guys are producing. So I thank you for doing the research, for showing us the biological mechanisms, and it's a great pleasure to have you here in the Frugal Health Podcast. Do you want to know more about fasting and how to live a healthful life, or even raw vegan recipes? Hygienic Fasting, Nature Surgery, and the book Natural Delicacies, Cooking Without a Stove are available on Amazon, and Hygienic Fasting is actually available on print on demand, so you can receive it at your home. But I also have 8 books published, 6 online courses, retreats here in Brazil, and I attend patients online in private sessions. Unfortunately, all the other books and the online courses are still only available in Portuguese. But if you want my help as a nutritionist, or even if you want to come to a retreat in Brazil, just sign up. The contact will be on the website and in the links below. And please don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell button for notifications, comment, share the video. If you do all those, you are going to help the channel to grow. And if we grow, you grow together, getting more vital, life-changing information so you can help yourself and others to make this a more healthy and better planet for all of us. And please introduce yourself and talk a little bit just about why did you got into gerontology?
Hello. So I'm Luigi Fontana. I'm a professor of medicine, the chair in translational metabolic health, and the scientific director of the Charles Perkins Center RPA clinic at the University of Sydney. Well, I started, as a medical doctor in Italy many years ago. Practicing medicine as a resident in internal medicine. I was not happy with the approach, the classical approach of treating disease after they have occurred. That is the main way of practicing medicine nowadays, more or less everywhere in the world. And and so I started to look into ways to basically promote chronic health instead of treating disease after they have occurred, to promoting chronic health. And one of my professors, the professor of geriatrics, he gave a lecture on calorie restriction in animals, in rodents, showing data of rodents eating 30-40% less calories, living up to 50% longer and much healthier. So that was basically an inspiring lecture. So I started to look into data in humans. Back then it was probably 2000, 1999. There were no data in humans, were only animals data, rodents data on calorie restriction without malnutrition. And therefore I started to look into a PhD on calorie restriction in humans, and I found that a professor in US, John Holosy, just got a grant to study calorie restriction and exercise in humans. So I wrote to him, and and he replied, and he said, why don't come to work with me? And so I left Italy, and I went to St. Louis, to Washington University in St. Louis, where I worked for 18 years with him. Uh, Before with him, and then I had my own group on calorie restriction in humans, and we produced some of the pioneering work, some of the most important pioneering work on the effects of calorie restriction without malnutrition. Again, calorie restriction, it means eating less, but without malnutrition. Because if you eat half pack of French fries, half hamburger, half soda, that's calorie restriction with malnutrition. This is going to increase death and vitamins, minerals, and fiber deficiencies. So it's more than just reducing calories. For example, this fad about fasting, intermittent fasting, the 5-2 diet, where people, they think just by eating, just by fasting 1 or 2 or 3 days a week, they're going to solve the problems, they're going to slow aging, is totally a scam. Is one of the many propaganda media fad related you know
BS. Sorry.
activities. Yes. And that's the beginning of my career, because I was pretty unhappy about the nutritional science. That is basically a bunch of epidemiological studies correlating I don't know, the consumption of broccoli, the consumption of blueberries or coffee or tea or whatever, with a certain risk of developing diseases. I think this is a weak science, association data that doesn't prove a cause-effect relationship. Instead of the data on calorie restriction, now we have data not only in mice and rats, we have data in simple molded organisms like yeast, worms, and flies, and monkeys, showing that calorie restriction, so eating less, avoiding the accumulation of abdominal fat as people age. As you can see, most people, as they age, they gain weight, and they gain weight mostly centrally in the abdomen, and that visceral fat is one of the leading cause of disease, because it's promoting insulin resistance, compensatory hyperinsulinemia, chronic inflammation, dyslipidemia. It's producing a number of factors influencing cancer. And so, now we have so many data, supporting the idea that a combination of exercise, different forms of exercise, and eating the right amount of calories, good quality calories, with, of course, other things, because, in the scientific world, we talk very little about, emotional health, spiritual health, and we talk about sleep, but the brain mind aspect of health is understudied, underappreciated. But definitely, based on what we know, if you think about a chess game, the king is nutrition, the queen is exercise, and then we have sleep, emotional health, spiritual health, and few other things that are important to maximize our probability of living a longer and healthier life.
Nice. Glad to know a little bit about your story. Never heard that part. So I'm going to ask you a lot of questions, but in the end, for sure, We are going to talk a little bit about natural hygiene, fasting, and raw food diet because I want to ask you a few questions about it. I read your work, for example, on protein restriction, maybe even more important than caloric restriction in promoting health span and lifespan. And also the research on BMI that the optimum BMI for longevity would be around 21 for reducing morbidity and mortality for all causes, if I remember correctly the research. But with that in mind, can you talk a little bit about the biological mechanisms, because probably most people don't know at home, like IGF-1, mTOR, and sirtuins, and MPK, FOXO, all these longevity genes versus the mitogenic genes, the mitogenic pathways, right?
Yeah, exactly. So as I said, our approach, unlike other doctor scientists, is to look at health from an aging perspective. So in the biology of aging field, we found that aging is not just a wear and tear process, is a highly regulated process, biological process, where a number of genes and proteins are regulating the accumulation of metabolic molecular damage in multiple cells and tissues. And by the way, these tissues are communicating. So if you have an aging cell with damage, this is communicating to other cells the damage and is accelerating the damage of multiple tissues and organs. So everything is interrelated. Uh, and and we found that there are a number of pathways that are regulating aging and disease of aging. The most important being the insulin, IGF-1 and mTOR pathway. We published in Science a review article with Walter Longo and Linda Partridge. Now is a very highly cited paper, basically showing evidence in multiple organisms that the insulin, IGF-1 and mTOR pathway is one of the most important. It's not the only one. There are many other pathways, but definitely it is an important one. And we know that because if we downregulate this pathway with nutrition or with genetic manipulation, now in rodents, we can knock down genes along these pathways and other pathways. And now we also know that rapamycin, that is a drug that is an inhibitor of mTOR, is increasing lifespan in multiple organisms. So we have strong evidence that in nature, a downregulation of the insulin, IGF-1 and mTOR pathway is linked with longer and healthier life. Okay, so that's the different approach that is not epidemiological, but is mechanism based. We are trying to dissect what pathways within our cells are sensing nutrients and other stimuli, and therefore are adapting their molecular functions to promote health or disease. And again, we know that major regulators of the insulin, IGF-1 and mTOR pathways, apart from insulin, IGF-1, of course, and other growth factors, are calories and proteins, especially certain amino acids like methionine, branched-chain amino acids, and and therefore this science is suggesting that the typical Western diet rich in calories and animal proteins is activating this pro-aging, pro-cancer pathway, and therefore increasing the probability of aging faster and developing a number of chronic disease. Well, the most common chronic disease, because another important finding of our research. So that's why, basically, as I said, the typical Western diet that is rich in animal products and empty calories and poor in fiber, vegetable fiber, is one of the leading cause of disease. And yes, as I was saying, basically the what we discovered is that many of the common chronic disease we see in our hospitals share a common metabolic substrate. So cancer, cardiovascular disease, stroke, fatty liver disease, diabetic nephropathy, and many other chronic diseases, they have a common metabolic molecular base. And therefore, if you are addressing these molecular pathways, especially since you are young, you can prevent multiple chronic disease. Instead of our medical system is basically focused on treating in a very specialized way each disease at once. And don't get me wrong, it's fantastic. You know, what we did in the last 150 years with modern medicine is amazing. The average lifespan at the beginning of the century was 45 years. And now is in developed countries, it's around 82 years, 80 for men, 84 for women. And this is amazing. You know, it's spectacular. But you know, my problem with this approach is that we can do much better. You know, we can do much better because now we have so much information where many of these diseases that people are developing are preventable, and therefore we could save billions of dollars and have people living longer, healthier, and more successful and fulfilling lives, instead of, because people they don't know better, they start this journey of eating unhealthy food, exercise, non-exercise, sedentary lifestyle, smoking, drinking alcohol, poor sleep, poor mental hygiene, and this is a recipe for disease and suffering and premature death.
I completely agree because I was a really sick child. When I was 22, I was about to do two surgeries. I was diabetic, a lot of health issues, a lot. And I went to, the medical usual way, the allopathic medicine, the, you know, treating disease without, thinking of causes. And they couldn't help me actually. And I felt like I'm too young to, to go into surgeries, etc. So I searched it, and I found natural hygiene, raw foods, and it's almost 20 years now that I haven't had one sick day. I can exercise way much better than I could when I was 20. I'm 40 right now. I'm way more intelligent. I heal a lot faster. A lot of my chronic diseases that I had since childhood went away. So I completely agree. But still, we are visionaries. People cannot see past. We're in the health field, right? Like we see a lot of medical doctors, nutritionists, and a lot of other specialties, but they cannot understand the importance of lifestyle medicine to the world, to themselves, to their patients. So it's sad
It's
somewhat
not. It's
to.
not they cannot understand. There are a number of issues. One is that, again, we don't have to minimize the achievement of modern medicine. Again, before World War II, if you got an infection, like bronchitis becoming a lung infection, 50% chance of being dead. Okay, without antibiotics. Surgery. If you have an accident right now, you have a good chance of surviving. Without, surgery, anesthesia, and many other interventions, basically your chance of dying were much, much higher. So the advancement in medicine has been spectacular. So we cannot, deny that. But
Sure.
as I said before, because most medical schools are just teaching how to diagnose diseases and how to treat them mainly with drugs and surgery, the situation is getting bad because there is an epidemic, well, a pandemic of unhealthy eating, smoking, sedentary lifestyle, and now there is also a problem with sleep and mental health because of many factors, including social media. And all these factors are basically causing a dramatic increase in chronic diseases that are becoming more and more prevalent in younger individuals, making most healthcare system unsustainable. And the problem is that, as I said, that I worked as a professor in US for 18 years, in Italy, now in Australia, and unfortunately in medical schools. If there are, in 6 years, 3 4 hours of this concept about, how lifestyles are regulating aging pathways and how we can prevent chronic disease, both in primary and secondary prevention, is a lot. So, as I said, one of my goals as a leading academic is to change these. I think this concept should be taught in schools, starting in primary schools. So it should be mandatory. Kids, they should not only learn grammar and math and geography, history, but they should learn how the human body works, but most importantly, how different lifestyles are impacting aging pathways and preventing multiple chronic diseases. And again, primary schools, secondary schools, university, not only doctors and health professionals, but every profession, every professional should have basic understanding, and also how to read papers, because another important problem that we have is that there is a lot of confusion out there. There is a lot of noise, especially in social media, because a lot of people that they start to read a few books, and then they start to become like preachers, like
Guru.
gurus, and they discuss things that they don't understand. They claim that because in their life they were sick and they started, a keto diet or a 5-2 diet or a vegan diet or a raw food diet. In my career, when I was in US, I studied and published papers on people who were raw food vegetarians, vegans, primordial diet. I don't know if you have heard about the primordial diet. There is this group in US where people are eating only raw meat, raw cheese, raw milk, because they firmly believe that human beings were not cultivating grains, and the problem is really grains. And so, the only way to stay healthy is to eat only meat, raw meat, not meat only. And as you know, now there is the carnivore, the paleo, and of course, each one of these guys, many of them, they are even not doctor, they are not medical trained. Again, they start to read a few books, they start to experiment on themselves without a full understanding of the complexity of how the human body works and the limitation of what we know. Because unfortunately, in 2024, we don't have yet biomarkers that can measure your biological age. Okay, so anybody can say whatever they want, because even in my lab, it is one of the most advanced lab in the world, on healthy longevity. We have only a number of biomarkers that we can measure to understand if an intervention is really slowing aging and promoting health. And that's a problem, and that's why there is all this confusion where everybody is claiming, from CR mimetics, NMR, and resveratrol, and this and that, and paleo, and keto, and vegan, and there is this constant fight among people who are claiming that they know better. I know, because I tried on myself and I've been cured. I'm now healthier. And again, as I said, in my life as a doctor, I have studied people of all these different type of sects. I will say sects, because they become like religions, and each one of them firmly believes that they know the truth.
I agree. I completely agree. I have my personal view as well because I have done. I'm a frugivore, like a fruit and vegetable nut based diet for almost 20 years for sure. I eat other foods, but it's like small amounts, right? The diet's primarily made of fruits. But for sure, like if you take a look of anthropoid primates, and we are still anthropoid primates classified by our biology, the anatomy, physiology, biochemistry, it's like 99.3% the same of us bonobos. So, I think I have a lot of data in different health science to promote, and it's been working for me for 18 years. But for sure, nobody knows exactly the ideal
No,
because
I understand, but the problem, that I met and studied people that have opposite position to yours. As I said, I studied people who were on a carnivore, raw meat carnivore diet, and they claim exactly what you just said. That since
yeah,
they
for
started
sure.
their diet for 10, 15 years, their health is fantastic, and then they drop dead 45 when they are 45, 50 years old. So there is a lot of misunderstanding, a lot of confusion, and a
For
lot of
sure.
damage, because you can influence people who are ignorant, and they just love your ideas, and they fell in love with your ideas, and you can cause damage. For example, in the raw food vegetarians people, we studied, many of them, they had osteoporosis, meaning a very low bone mass that is increasing the risk of developing a bone fracture, a hip fracture when you are probably older than 50 is almost a dead sentence. And so I think, we have to be very careful about what we say, and what we
I I
advocate,
I
because it can be very, very risky. And as I said, I'm telling you that because I've studied these people. It's not, just my ideas. They came to my lab in US, and we studied them. And I can tell you that each one of them, the vegetarian, the raw food vegetarians, the paleo, the carnivores, all of them had the same story. Since I started this diet, my health has improved. I feel fantastic, and just follow me.
For sure, for sure. I agree, completely agree. That's why, for example, at least in my work, I'm a nutritionist, right? So, like here in Brazil, it's like 5 years of university, and for the last 18 years, I have studied the science as well. Like so for sure, I do some stuff that is not have been exactly proven, like a frugivore diet, for example, or like 40-day water fast. For sure, there's True North Health Center in California. I even doing 40-day water fasting people, but still there's no randomized clinical trial or meta-analysis on it. But still, I do it. But what I recommend for people, at least in like my books, in social media, etc., I always show the scientific articles and where I'm getting the ideas, and what I put out there is like eat more fruits and vegetables, eat more plants, no processed food, less animal protein, cut out refined foods. For example, for me, I even don't believe in olive oil. I know a lot of you guys in the longevity field believe in olive oil, but it's high in calories, and a lot of micronutrient losses, a loss of fiber, etc. So for sure, for sure, I completely agree that it's like a lot of nonsense in social media, and nobody, like in Brazil, they trash, a lot of medical doctors trash out fruits because it's high in sugar. But like the scientific literature just shows that fruits and vegetables are like really healthy food and inversely correlated with like all chronic diseases. So
No, no, no.
there's
That's true. That's true. But the fact that that something is healthy, it doesn't mean that then you have to become just eating that. food is like, with olive oil, it depends. If you're using a couple of 2-3 tablespoons of olive oil per day, it's not a problem. Of course, if you are basically pouring liters of olive oil on your food, is bad, because 1 tablespoon of olive oil is 120 calories. And therefore, you have to count about, you have to, you cannot, use all this olive oil, as it's a healthy substance. And therefore, that's one of the problems, it's like, people say, green tea contains catechins. And then, basically I drink liters of green tea, but I also eat fast food and everything. But because I'm drinking green tea, now I'm protected from cancer, because there is a science paper showing the catechins is blocking, some of these cancer pathways. That's a nonsense. It's going from some evidence and make this evidence extreme, and basically say, okay, because some fruit is healthy, now I eat only fruit. And going back, to the fact, that apes are eating only raw food, yes, but they are not only eating fruit; they are eating massive amounts of vegetables in terms of leaves, and they spend most of their day eating leaves. Okay, so basically, many hours a day they keep eating, chewing leaves to extract enough proteins from this high dense fiber. First of all, this is not possible for human beings. We cannot spend 5-6 hours a day to chewing vegetable to extract enough proteins. And by the way, we don't know what is the average lifespan of these monkeys. How long they live in reality. Is the same idea that I hear. Basically people. So the paleo people, they say, before agriculture, people, they were healthier. So they talk about these aboriginal in North America, Australia, or Eskimos. But that's nonsense. These people, they were living on average 25-30 years. And as far as I know, it's very difficult to see any people, even people who were living in North America before, the Westerner came, probably when they were 65, 70, they were all dead. So what does it mean? It's nonsense. The arguments, some of these arguments that I hear are totally unlogical. They are totally not based on data. They are just, personal opinions based on unlogical thinking that make no sense. So unless we go back to the biology of aging and we really try to understand how the human body works, how cells are regulating the accumulation of damage, all the rest is just noise. Okay, it's just personal opinion based on a few papers that each one of us can select. I can go on PubMed and find everything you want. I can find papers showing that high protein is good. I can find paper that low protein is good. I can find paper on anything you want. I can find not one paper, multiple papers, if I want. If I really dig into PubMed, I can find whatever I want. And that's why there is a lot of confusion, not only in the public, but also between us, between scientists. There are people who are fighting, and there are scientists who believe in keto, paleo, others who are vegan. Each one has his own ideas, and they basically just keep digging into the same data to reinforce their ideas and their dogmas. So it's very complicated. It's not easy.
I agree, I agree. But like we can use epidemiology for the blue zones and have an idea, because of the biological mechanism of the nutrient sensing pathways. It works for the blue zones. It works in
Yeah,
animal
again,
models.
the blue zone is another basically
We can agree.
media story, because to be honest, I've been in Okinawa, and I've been in Sardinia because I'm from Italy. So I've been there, and I met, with the scientists who are working and studying. There are some interesting data, but to be honest, to claim that, we have strong data that the blue zones are really, the data from these blue zones are really strong. It's not true. There is a lot of myth, a lot of twisting of data. In Sardinia, the data are very, very weak. There are few papers, but very, very weak data. And in Okinawa, there are some data from my friend Wilcox, Craig Wilcox, and others, suggesting that after World War II, the Okinawans were living longer because they were eating a calorie restricted, low protein, high fiber diet.
Sweet potatoes.
But
100%.
the data are weak. Okay, so they are not strong data. So again, this blue zone is another one of these American driven media fad
But
that is based on arguable data, okay, at best.
but I think we can agree in some stuff like maintaining a BMI of 21, exercising,
Okay, so let's
high
go
intensity.
back. Let's go back. To the real data. That's what
Yeah.
I'm interested in, and that's what I'm trying to do on my YouTube channel, Longevity Now FL, where I'm trying, to summarize, what I know. I've been in this field for the last 30 years as a scientist, as a doctor. And I know many of the people working in the aging field, are my colleagues, and so I know what happens behind the scene of what is published. Yes, so if we have to summarize what we know with a certain degree of certainty in 2024, that number one, the most important factor for longevity is to keep your abdomen as flat as possible. It's not body weight, it's not BMI. BMI is a very crude estimate. You can have a BMI of 25, mostly fat, and you can have a BMI of 25 and being very muscular. So very, very low abdominal fat, and you have a big muscle mass. The metabolic consequences are the opposite. Okay, so BMI is not a good measure of health. The best measure of health right now is your waistline and your muscle mass. So ideally, what we should do as we age is to try to keep our waistline as low as possible and to maintain our muscle mass. Okay? And you do that
Sure.
through endurance and resistance exercise and eating a primarily plant-based diet that is rich in vegetable fibers. So a plant-based diet, as we publish in the European Journal. So some people, they believe that, because they are vegetarians, they are vegans, and they avoid animal products, they are healthy. The data are showing that vegetarians who are eating refined and processed food, as many vegetarians do, because there are a lot of young individuals that they just firmly believe that, the only problem is animal products, meat. And if you remove meat from your diet, then you're going to be healthy. That's totally wrong. We know from epidemiological data that these people who are vegetarians eating refined and processed food, vegan lasagna, vegan pizzas, all these
Beyond
sweet
Burger.
and stuff like that, yeah, all these new now animal vegetable
Burgers.
burgers, they have a 20% higher risk of mortality, not lower mortality. So again, a plant-based diet should be a diet rich in minimally processed food, mainly whole
Hopefully.
grains, beans, vegetables, nuts and seeds. Uh, I consume some fish, small fish. I try to stay away from tuna, all these swordfish, all these big fish because they accumulate mercury. Because as
The bioaccumulation, biomagnification of
yeah, and I don't think you have to be 100% vegetarians. If you want to consume once in a while, some meat, good
I
quality
completely
meat
agree.
is
Just
okay. Is okay. You don't have to be,
persuasion,
if
I completely agree with you in
yeah.
that
So for
sense.
if you have ethical reason, it's fine. You can be on a vegan diet uh, and be healthy, provided where you're gonna get the vitamin B12 and the zinc and other nutrients, but especially the vitamin B12. If you are a strict vegan, you cannot get B12 from vegetable products. So you need to have a supplement. Okay. So provided what you are doing and where you're gonna get your nutrients, you can be a vegan. It's not necessary, but if for ethical reasons, you don't want to kill animals and you don't want to eat any type of animals, it's fine, provided you know what you are doing. But again, going back, the most important factor is to keep your waistline as low as possible. We don't have big muscle there, so the lower the waist circumference, the better. There are multiple studies showing that, from Frank Hu, from Harvard, that the higher your waist circumference, well within the normal cutoffs in US, the higher the risk of developing multiple chronic disease and unhealthy aging as you get older. Uh, and maintain muscle mass by a moderate combination of endurance and resistant exercise. Is also very important to do flexibility type of exercise and posture, because one of the leading cause of medical costs is back pain and hip and knee pain, because of the bad posture that reverberates, and as people they get older, they start to have these horrible back pain. They start to take medications, painkillers, and so is a number of factors that we have to keep into our radar, if we want to stay healthy. And as I said, exercise is an important factor, but unlike most people think, when I was in US, we were studying people who were running 50 to 60 miles per week. They firmly believed that exercise was the most important anti-aging factor. And for example, Peter Attia is also claiming that exercise is the most important factor for longevity. That's not true. That's not based on science. This is based on his opinion as a surgeon. He's not a scientist, unlike most people claim. My mentor, John Hollogy, who was, he's dead, but he was a leading authority in exercise. Just to tell you, he won the gold medal at the Sydney Olympic Games and $500,000 prize as a recognition for his pioneering work on exercise and sport medicine. So he was convinced that exercise was the most powerful anti-aging intervention. So he designed multiple studies, where he compared animals who were lean because they were exercising every day versus animals who were calorie restricted. So they have the same body weight because they were eating less. What he found is that exercise was increasing average lifespan, but not maximal lifespan. Instead of animals who had the same weight on calorie restriction without malnutrition, they live longer. So they had an extension of average and maximal lifespan. What does it mean? It means that exercise improves metabolic health, so is reducing the risk of developing metabolic diseases, but it's not acting on the aging pathways. Instead of calorie restriction, is slowing aging and protecting against chronic diseases. And John told me, look, when I discovered that, then I changed my mind and I have realized that many of my chronic conditions that I had in my life, from kidney to cancers and many other ones, were due to these crazy idea that I had in my mind that, exercise was the only important factor and that I could eat and drink whatever I wanted, a lot of animal products, a lot of, whatever food, because I could burn my calories. And so being lean because I was doing a huge amount of exercise, and I did a bad thing, and now I'm paying the consequences of my wrong ideas as a scientist, as a doctor. So that's what I'm telling you, that people, they have a lot of ideas when they are 30, 40, 50, everything goes well, more or less. When you start to get in your 60s, 70s, and 80s, then is when people, they pay the consequences of their wrong ideas based on weak data and misunderstanding of how the human body works.
What other subjects would you want to view here? Do you want to know more about? Please comment below. Don't forget to share the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell for notifications. And if you want to help our work and help yourself, 2 of my 10 books are already translated and published in English on Amazon. And Hygienic Fasting Nature Surgery is actually available print on demand also. And Natural Delicacies, Cooking Without a Stove, it's on Kindle. So if you want my help, the link below for the website and for the WhatsApp contact, you can get a consultation, retreats, online courses, and read all the books. It's life-changing information for the most updated lifestyle medicine information out there in the planet. I completely agree with everything you said from the beginning to now, right? Although I think I'm right, like in my personal views, I completely agree with everything you said, even what you said about Peter and others that, like they claim a lot about like high protein diets, but there's, all the science goes against it. Still, they like to eat their meat in higher quantities, so they always claim things,
Yeah, the
from
problem,
their own.
that one of the problems, that is out there is that, again, in schools we don't teach people, our children, to read the literature. So people, they don't understand what is an epidemiological study, what is a randomized clinical trial, what are the data in animals, how can we translate animal data from mice into humans or flies into humans. So I hear some of my colleagues say, I did an experiment in flies and in worms showing that this intervention is extending lifespan. Therefore, now I'm applying that to myself. Are you crazy? A worm is a worm. It's not a human. A mice is a mice. A mouse is a mouse. The fasting fad started because we showed that in rodents, if you do intermittent fasting, these animals are living longer. But 2 days of fasting in a rodent is deadly. So if you fast a mouse for 2 days, it dies of starvation. You and me, I have a BMI around 21, I can go for a month without eating. So what we study in rodents cannot be applied in humans because rodents are not humans. So the data for rodents are interesting to uh, uh, provide some preliminary
Insight.
data to be tested in humans. And that's one of the major misconceptions. And then, a lot of these gurus out there uh, that, they are surgeons and then they become longevity expert based on what? Where are the signs? Where the science is coming from? Where this high exercise, high protein is coming from? There are no data, where there are, as I said before, there is a lot of data out there that can be manipulated if you're not able to read the literature properly.
I completely agree. But like nowadays, you're as good as the amount of followers you have. So your curriculum is no more like the scientific papers or the data, but the amount of followers you have. So these guys talk whatever they want, and like so.
Yeah, and
Although I may have my own perspectives because I have I have done caloric restriction for a raw food diet the way I practice, like eating 2 kilos of watermelon, a lot of leafy greens, a lot of some nuts and seeds and other stuff is although it's already a caloric restriction and protein restriction. So I read the science from you guys, and that's why I'm really thankful for you guys to understand the biological mechanism to pass on. So I I think still with a lot of mistakes, we can still see the primordials like a caloric restriction, whole food plant based diet, high intensity training. For example, tennis nowadays are being seen as the longevity sports because the racket sports through different biological mechanisms helps like longevity. Yeah, some intermittent fasting and
yeah, look,
sunshine.
the the problem is that, think about it, there are multinationals that make billions of dollars in revenue and they invest 1% or more of their annual income into what? Into advertisement. That's how it works. So basically, if you have millions of dollars to spend, you hire a bunch of journalists, you hire a bunch of influencers, and basically you create, these persons, these influencer, where you inject huge amount of money, and then people they have the best tools, to increase their propaganda, and that's how it works. And the social media, they are just magnifying this problem. And But as I said, the problem is that by following some of these advertisements, think about the smoking industry. Before we knew that smoking was really deadly. There was a huge amount of money. There are articles showing that doctors, they were saying, I smoke Camel, and I feel great. I feel great. This is the best cigarettes ever. So basically, the smoke industry, the tobacco industry, was bribing doctors, to claim that smoking was good. So that's how it works. It was 50 years ago, 2,000 years ago. It's always the same. It's the propaganda machine that is. But the question is, for the people who are watching us, is the problem is, are you interested to be part of the propaganda, a victim of the propaganda, or you are interested in understanding how your human body works and what it can be done to minimize the accumulation of metabolic molecular damage? Are you just interested in losing weight or to stay healthy? Because if you are interested in losing weight, I can give you a ton of very unhealthy substances that are making you losing weight. Are you going to live longer and healthier by losing weight on these unhealthy dietary or other medications or substances that you can use. Smoking, if you smoke heavily, you're going to lose weight, but you're going to die. Okay, so if you're just eating bread and water, you're going to lose weight, no doubt, but you're going to die of malnutrition within 5 years. So again, that's the problem. There is a lot of noise out there, a lot of confusion, and people, they don't understand really how to read the literature. And to be honest, because we have to be honest. I mean, I think, I'm one of the leading scientists in the world on nutrition and healthy longevity. Do I have a conclusive answer? No, we don't. We are still trying to understand these beautiful, complex organisms and the many factors that are carving how the human body works and optimize health. I hope that with this new advancement in omics and bioinformatics, through AI, we are going to soon develop biomarkers of biological age, where you claim that your intervention is delaying aging, is making you healthier. Now, once we have these biomarkers, we can do a study and see if this intervention is really slowing your biological age or not. And with those information, then luckily we can then dismiss all these fads and myths and have a more conclusive ideas of if we start a paleo diet or a high protein diet, or if we exercise on a paleo diet, on a high protein diet, or we take NMN, or we take resveratrol, or we take any of these CR mimetics, is really slowing aging, yes or not? Unfortunately, we are not there yet.
We have some data on telomerase, for example, and plant-based diets upregulating telomerase. We have some data on like centenarians have like low inflammation profile. So like plant-based diets would be anti-inflammatory foods. So we have bits and pieces, right? Like of biomarkers, and we can extrapolate for sure. We still don't have like all the data, but like
Yeah, yeah.
there's some
Again,
data.
again, the telomere, length is, I don't use it, because it's a very unsophisticated way to measure. One of my friend who is a millionaire, he sent his blood, to 3 different labs in US to measure the telomere length, and he got 3 different results. One lab was saying he was younger, one it was older, and one it was the same age. For this idea that there are anti-inflammatory diets, I think this is wrong. We have data that now we are writing a manuscript where there are these epidemiological data suggesting that certain type of diet, especially plant-based diet, they are anti-inflammatory, but these are association data. I did a randomized clinical trial in US where we randomized people to a Mediterranean-like diet, very rich in whole grains, beans, fish, and nuts and seeds, no refined processed food, no red meat, for 2 months. But in the first 2 months, I asked my dietitian to clamp their body weight. I wanted to study the effects of improving quality. And by the way, we were feeding people, so we knew that they were eating what we prescribed. We clamped their body weight, and we didn't see a change in C-reactive protein, TNF-alpha, or other pro-inflammatory cytokines. We saw a reduction in inflammation only when they lost weight. So a randomized clinical trial, not association studies, are showing that it's not the plant food that is reducing inflammation, but is your weight, your body weight, your visceral fat. And we have substantive data showing that the major determinant of chronic inflammation is your waist circumference, your visceral fat. So if you want to lower your inflammation, you have to lower your waist circumference. So that's what I'm telling you, that there is a lot of data there. If you go on PubMed and you put anti-inflammatory diets, you're going to find hundreds of papers. And these hundreds of papers, they are just epidemiological data by fantastic groups, like, Walter Wheeler from Harvard, Frank Hu, so big groups that are just analyzing, these huge epidemiological data sets, and they see these anti-inflammatory effects of these anti-inflammatory diets. And by the way, in some of these inflammatory diets, there is like pizzas and, that, is anti-inflammatory. But then, when you do a randomized clinical trial like I did, where I say, okay, let's look at what happens if you improve quality without changing body weight, without calorie restriction. And the results are no change in inflammation. Only calorie restriction, reducing your waist circumference, is lowering your C-reactive protein, not the quality of diet. Can you get, what I'm saying? The literature out there is very complicated, and we need more studies, to deal, to go in. For example, now we have data we just submitted for publication of people who have been fasting for 10 days. And unlike what was my hypothesis that, fasting is lowering inflammation, we saw an increase in inflammation, a big increase in C-reactive protein and other pro-inflammatory cytokines. And we also saw an increase in prothrombotic proteins and in urinary thromboxane B2, that is a marker of platelet activation. So is this just transient? Probably yes. Can these pro-inflammatory, prothrombotic response to fasting, to prolonged fasting, cause damage in certain people who have unstable plaques or have a prothrombotic status? Probably yes. So again, that's why, we have to be very careful. For example, a lot of people out there, including David Sinclair, they talk about fasting increasing autophagy. There are no data in humans showing that fasting is increasing autophagy. Show me a paper. Show me a single paper in humans showing that fasting is increasing autophagy. There are no data whatsoever. And people, they are claiming that, fasting is reducing inflammation, is increasing autophagy, and they just parroting what other people say without doing proper science. So that's what I'm saying, we need to be very, very careful, and we need more studies to really dissect what is doing what in a mechanistic way, instead of just, talking, big ideas, the blue zones, and the carnivores, vegetarian, paleo, vegan. It's more complicated than that, unfortunately.
So for you, what do
Yes.
you do? How is your lifestyle? Because for sure, being a gerontologist, you think of adapting your lifestyle to what you learn in the science, for sure, right? So how do you live your life, like in terms of exercise, diet, sunshine, and sleep? There's probably the four basic ones.
Yeah, look, I wrote a book called The Path to Longevity, where I summarize what I know in 2024 for lay people. Otherwise, a very short article, if you go on Google and you put Luigi Fontana 10 tip for cardiovascular aging, is an article I published for the European Heart Journal, that is the top cardiological journal in the world. There, there are 10 points that I think are very important, but just to summarize. As I said, number one is to keep your waist circumference low and increase your muscle mass, maintain your muscle mass, especially the big muscle of the legs and gluteal muscles. And as we said before, endurance and resistant exercise and lower caloric intake is important. Number two, consume mainly a plant-based, non-refined processed food diet with some fish. And if you want, probably I eat meat, pasture raised meat maybe once every 10 days, maybe, but fish 2-3 times a week. And my diet is mainly a wide diversity of different type of vegetables, both raw and cooked, based on their phytate and anti-nutrients content. I eat a lot of non-refined whole grains and beans, seeds, and some fruits. Um, then if you are overweight, you can use fasting or time restricted feeding in a proper way. As I said before, we publish data showing that if you lose weight with intermittent fasting, but you're eating a typical Western diet in the feasting days, you have a reduction in body weight, in body fat, but no change in inflammation, no change in glucose and insulin sensitivity, and many other factors. So you're losing weight without having the metabolic benefits of weight loss. Then, very important is to avoid smoking, vaping, alcohol. Alcohol is a toxic substance. It's not Luigi Fontana, but the World Health Organization and the IARC are claiming that alcohol is a carcinogenic, teratogenic substance, is a group 1 carcinogenic substance, so it increases the risk of cancer. So there is no limit, low limit of safety. Even one glass of wine or beer is increasing your risk of cancer, because ethanol gets metabolized to acetaldehyde that is causing DNA damage. And therefore, smoking and alcohol are equally increasing your risk of developing chronic disease. Of course, if you smoke one cigarette once a year, nothing happens. If you drink a glass of wine, with your friends, once every few weeks, nothing happens. But if you regularly drink wine, like most people do, for lunch and dinner and in the evening, that's not good. And it's not me, there are, these are the major cancer and now also cardiovascular societies who are claiming that. And what else? Sleep is very important. There is a crisis of sleep. People, they're not sleeping well. They're not sleeping in good. Deep sleep is very important. You can sleep maybe 6 hours, 7 hours, but if you spend 20% of your time, I have a Aura ring. Normally, I sleep, between 6.5, 7 hours per night, but 20+% of my time is in deep sleep. Okay, we have different phases. We have phase 1, 2, and 3, and then REM. And the most important, where your brain is rejuvenating is eliminating the pro-dementia molecules is during deep sleep. So I think, for example, the Aura Ring is a good way for measuring the quality, not just the quantity, the quality of your sleep. And there are many intervention, exercise, meditation, and other ones, pink noise, that can improve your deep sleep. And as I said, another important part of my life is emotional health, spiritual health. We have data showing that mental stress, these are mechanistic data, mental stress is accelerating aging, because when you have an excess of catecholamines, when you are stressed, you have an increase in norepinephrine, epinephrine, these are catecholamines, they activate a molecule called AC5. This is a transductional factor in your cells that is promoting aging and cardiovascular aging and accelerating aging, reducing lifespan. So mental stress is very bad. And, as many people, they are very stressed in our society. They don't have an emotional balance. They don't have a spiritual view of their life. And that's why they are very stressed. And they try to cope with this increased stress, emotional distress and depression by drinking, eating a lot, video gaming, unhealthy sex, and you name it. Okay, so this is just a reaction to a an unhealthy mental state that is causing stress, depression, and people, they need a dopamine boost, and they use food, alcohol, drugs, smoking, anything, to boost their dopamine transiently to feel better, but it's a vicious circle that is getting worse and worse and worse. And therefore, I think, as I say in many of my videos on YouTube, that we need to spend a lot of time into more mindfulness, but mostly uh, reading philosophical books. There are certain philosophers, both in Eastern and Western society, that they really reframe how the human beings should invest their energy and time into an understanding of what is the role of a human being in this world, what is death, what is life, what is wisdom. And unless, we have a proper understanding of these concepts, by definition, we are going to be unhappy, because wealth, money, objects, they are not they are only transitorily satisfying our needs as human beings. And unless, we understand that, then, we are going to be stressed, depressed, because, we want more money. We look at other people. I want to buy the Ferrari. I want to buy this. I want to buy that. And people think, that by buying objects, they're going to be happier, but they are not. And this is causing a vicious circle of emotional, mental, and metabolic unhealthiness. And I think, this topic is totally understudied in the medical scientific community. But I personally believe that is one of the strongest factor driving this epidemic of obesity, opioid addiction, smoking, drinking, now social addiction, social media addiction, you name it. It's a total addiction to unhealthy lifestyles driven by emotional distress, emotional, spiritual poverty.
I completely agree. Another thing that I think is too much underestimated is chronobiology, chrononutrition. Like people eat too late at night. They see too much electric lights, blue lights at night, and like there's a lot of lifestyle medicine factors that I think it's underestimated. So just before we finish it up, could you tell like how do you carry on a day for you? Like how do you carry on your lifestyle medicine, like routine?
What do you mean personally?
Yeah, personally. Yeah, people like to know, like
What I
people
just
are,
to-
are
what I just told you. Basically,
yeah,
I'm
yeah, yeah.
50. I'm 55 years old. I'm still, lean. I have a low waist circumference. I exercise daily. Exercise is a daily medicine. It's not something you can do only twice a week. You go to the gym. I'll do a number of different type of exercise. I bike in the nature. Luckily, I live in Sydney, where the weather is beautiful. I live in a beautiful place. With a lot of low pollution forests, and so I'll bike regularly. I swim. I do resistance exercise in the gym, but you can do at home easily. 3 times a week. Uh, and I spend a lot of my time, reading, painting, and reading philosophical books, writing, and doing videos on philosophical concept. I'm reading authors like Lotze, Chuang-Tzu, Seneca, Marco Aurelius, Krishnamurti, and many other ones where I share and I learn their point of view on what is a healthy approach to life. And as I said, my diet is mainly a plant-based pescatarian diet. Luckily, again, I live in Sydney, so I can go to the fish market and buy fresh fish, 2-3 times a week. Uh, so it's as I said, as I describe in my videos on YouTube or on my books or on my scientific articles, is a balance. There are many factors that are important to leading a healthy, happy, and fulfilling life. And it's not just weight, it's not just living longer. Because, for example, the people I've been studying that were doing calorie restriction in the US, some of them, they are obsessed with their food. They are counting every single calories, and they try to be as lean as possible. Some people, they also become frail, to be so obsessive about calorie restriction. But even if they live 5 years, 10 years longer, if it is really worth it. What is the balance? What is the balance of life? What is the balance? What is your balance? Your personal balance? What is the best combination of factors that are basically giving you the best outcome in terms of quality versus quantity? And this is a personal journey. There is not a single answer for everybody. This is a personal single journey that must be informed by science, philosophy, and a correct approach to life. And then you choose based on the best information available and based on your personal journey where you want to go. There is not a single answer to that question.
I agree. I agree. It's just like everybody, people at home like to know, these details. I know you talked a lot about last question. Have you ever tried a raw food diet, and have you ever tried a water fast, or even studying natural hygiene, like the science of health, as we call it?
Look, I tried a raw food vegetarian diet because, as I said, when I was in US, I studied people I published a few papers on people who are practicing a raw food vegetarian diet. And so
I
I
read.
was I was going to their retreats, and so I tried their food, and to be honest, it's good. The question is, what are the long-term consequences of a restrictive um, uh, raw food vegetarian diet? So 30, 40, 50 years of this diet is really promoting health, global health, bones and everything, yes or not? We don't know. We don't know yet. As I said, uh, people think, that something is good if you had more is better. That's not true. It's like, if you say, okay, in a car, the wheels are important. Instead of having 4 wheels, we have 20 wheels. It's better. No, it's not better. You have to have efficiency. Efficiency means, you have the right amount of that stuff to optimize efficiency. That's how nature works, is efficiency. Sort of in many people, they think, okay, if I drink a glass of green tea, it's healthy. If I drink 10 liters of green tea per day, it must be better. No, it doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that. So I don't have a final answer to tell you if a long-term restrictive raw food vegetarian diet is healthy. My sense is that probably is not. Probably is not. It may cause deficiency, long-term deficiencies that later in life can cause problems, including stroke and bone fractures and other factors. There are epidemiological data showing that people who have been on a vegan diet for many years, they have a higher risk of stroke, for example, even if their heart is protected. So I don't have a final answer. So that's why I always suggest balance. Don't be extreme. Try to use balance in your life. Definitely a plant-based minimal processed diet is key, but without being extreme. That's my point of view. Can I tell you, we have data to support, 100% my data? No, nobody knows. You don't know, I don't know. Nobody knows.
Sure.
Then, for fasting, no, I never tried fasting. Right now, we have just completed a randomized clinical trial, like just before Christmas, where we randomized people for 3 days of water-only fasting with and without exercise. So basically, people that were doing the 3-day fasting uh, uh, without exercise or before starting fasting, they did an intense bout of exercise to try to deplete glycogen, muscle glycogen and liver glycogen as much as possible. And the primary outcome of this study is going to be autophagy. So we're going to see if there is an increase in autophagy with 3-day fasting with or without exercise. Plus, we are doing metabolomics, proteomics, and many other measurements. We had a CGM, the continuous glucose monitoring. We did endothelial function. So it's going to be a very, very important study to see what are the outcomes of fasting, 3-day fasting with and without exercise on inflammation, all the other factors. So we are going to start to analyze the data just in the new year. Probably by June, we're going to start to publish the results of these randomized clinical trial, because as you know, most of the prolonged fasting studies are single arms. So basically are people that they went to a clinic in California, like, I sent one of my postdoc, or in Germany, but they are not randomized. They are not very well done. And so this is going to probably the first study to look at the multi-omics, physiological and autophagy response to fasting. So I'm going to let you know in June, basically, what the results of this randomized clinical trial that we just completed is going to be. And we'll go from there. If we see there are positive results, probably I'm going to start to implement fasting in my life. If I see there are negative or mixed results, probably I'm not going to do it.
I see. Nice, nice. Yeah, Butcher and Wilhelm and True North, the two main fasting centers that are publishing scientific research on it, and for sure,
Yeah.
still,
No, we have publications submitted for publication with True North. I sent one of my postdoc to True North for a year to collect data, and we found that in these 20 people in True North who were doing these 10 days on average 10 days fasting, there was an increase in C-reactive protein, inflammation, prothrombotic factors. So that's what I'm telling you, that the jury is still out there. Okay, I'm not super convinced that fasting is safe for everybody.
sure, for sure. I was just wondering, wanting to have your opinion. I First of all, Luigi, how people can get in touch with you, like to get to know your books, your channel, your social media, to learn more, and even your research.
Well, for my research, it's simple. You go on PubMed, or you go on Google, you put Luigi Fontana, and if you go, for example, on Google Scholar, that is freely available, Google Scholar, and pull you Luigi Fontana, you're going to find my publication. But anyway, on PubMed, you're going to see my publications. Many of them, they are very, very science difficult. So for many people, it's going to be difficult to understand. It's a very, academic language that I use. And that's why I wrote several books, some in Italian, some in English. Some of those have been translated into Chinese and Japanese. Unfortunately, there was no interest in the Portuguese or Spanish community. But the Path to Longevity probably is my best book, where I try to summarize 30 years, 40 years of my medical and scientific practice into what I think in 2020, when we published a paper, was the best evidence for healthy longevity and emotional well-being and environmental health. And then, I have a YouTube channel, apart from, being on Instagram, where I typically post scientific journals, papers that I think are interesting. I have an Instagram channel and Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter, X. But I have a YouTube channel called Longevity Now FL, where I regularly post videos in both English and Italian on articles or philosophical ideas and scientific articles, my papers. There are some of my lectures I gave, in different universities, and so these are the media where people, if they're interested to have my point of view, that, as I said, I'm not, God. I don't know everybody. Nobody in this world knows uh, everything. We are in a learning curve. Of course, we know much more than 50, 100 years ago, and is a work in progress. And as science, good science, improves our understanding, I think we're going to have a better understanding. But just to finish, I think that in 2024 we already have enough knowledge to minimize our probability of developing many of the most common chronic diseases and to live a longer, healthier, and happier life. And I will say 70% of the knowledge is already there. If people would practice what I wrote in my books and what I say in my videos and my scientific journal published in Science, Nature, Cell, New England, and many other important journals, they will maximize their probability of living a longer, healthier life. Of course, we need to know more. We need to do more science and using these multi-omics and now these wearables and sensors to measure what different interventions they do on me, because I don't care about what happens in a group. I care what happens on me based on my genetic and epigenetic background. But we are not there yet. Okay, so we are not so sophisticated. We don't have biomarkers that can really, with precision, tell us if what we are doing is really promoting health or is maybe causing damage.
Nice, nice. To finish, I would like to thank you again for your work, for your time, for your knowledge, because I have learned a lot throughout these years with the papers you publish. It, I have taught, I give lectures on it, like always showing a lot of your papers and all the colleagues of yours that I also think are right. I I'm I'm glad that you were doing the science for us. And also, if you ever want to try for a few, for a few, 10 days, a raw food diet inside the principles of natural hygiene. I run retreats in Brazil. I would you would be my guest to see how we do the food. Pretty simple, pretty all whole, no oil, no salt, no, So it would be a pleasure to have you here, and it was a pleasure to interview you, Luigi. Keep doing the research, keep doing the work. The world will understand sooner or later the science and the way to that we should be carrying on our lives. That exactly what you said. We have a lot of data, enough data to prevent most of chronic diseases, and to have a better life for all of us. But the public and the medical authorities are still uh, slow to learn or slow to change, right? So I hope we keep growing and changing the world for the better with this scientific knowledge that health is produced by healthful living, as we say in natural hygiene. And it was a pleasure. Thank you,
Thank
Luigi.
you. Thank you so much. Have a nice day. Bye. Bye bye.
Did you like the podcast? What other subjects would you want to view here? Do you want to know more about? Please comment below. Don't forget to share the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell for notifications. And if you want to help our work and help yourself, 2 of my 10 books are already translated and published in English on Amazon. And Hygienic Fasting Nature Surgery is actually available print on demand also. And Natural Delicacies Cooking Without a Stove, it's on Kindle. So if you want my help, the link below for the website and for the WhatsApp contact, you can get a consultation, retreats, online courses, and read all the books. It's life-changing information for the most updated lifestyle medicine information out there in the planet. Hope I can help, and don't forget to click these videos to know more.